Hey everybody! Sorry we're getting a little bit late, but it's time for the weekly news recap from the 27th of May to the 2nd of June, 2024. So, this week Sony had their State of Play, so we're just going to recap what was happening during that. Spoilers, it was kind of disappointing. Anyway, I'm going to start off with the video that they ended it with, which is Astrobot getting their own fully purchasable game that is no longer tied to a peripheral of some kind. The first Astrobot game was locked to the iToy or the camera, and then the second one was a PlayStation VR title, and then the third one was PlayStation 5. You had to buy one. But it came with the console, so you didn't actually have to buy the game itself. And now this one, finally, Astrobot, I think it's just called Astrobot as well, there's no subtitle or anything, is just its own thing. It's very much PlayStation 5 Super Mario game, as you'll see in a moment. We get to the gameplay parts. So it is third person, kind of fun platforming type stuff. So just think like the newer Super Mario 3D games, with some throwbacks to some PlayStation peripherals and some characters that Sony have forgotten about, but not forgotten about enough because they were able to put them into this Astrobot game. There's the hunter from Bloodborne is in there somewhere. Parappa the Rapper is in there somewhere. It does seem like the cameo characters might actually be involved in whatever plot is in the game. But as you can see, it's got a lot of Mario, Crash Bandicoot kind of thing going for it. It looks fun, admittedly, and I wasn't really expecting it. I was kind of assuming that they would have made an Astrobot game by now. That was just its own thing and wasn't there to just sell other things. Yeah, they've forgotten about that series. They've forgotten about that series. Anyway, they haven't forgotten about it enough by the looks of things. Anyway, Astrobot, September 6th of this year, and it will be probably the only PlayStation first-party game for the rest of the year. Can't imagine they're going to have anything else, or if they were going to have something else, they would have announced it by now. Anyway, more on that if you want to check it out yourselves. And we have Concord, which both impressed and then heavily disappointed everybody when they saw it. So, despite what it looks like, Concord is not a single-player party action-adventure type thing. It's kind of what people were hoping for when they saw the initial trailer for it. It was very Guardians of the Galaxy for a good while. But as it transpires, no, it's not that at all. It's Overwatch. It's Guardians of the Galaxy Overwatch, but PlayStation. That's it. Pretty disappointing. As we'll see later on, the community in general was also not particularly enthused to learn that, yeah, it's just another hero shooter. Yawn. Yawn fest. Characters are very much just Guardians of the Galaxy people. There's a Star-Lord, there's a Gamora, there's a Drake, or not Drake, Drax, there's a Groot. There's no Rocket Raccoon, as far as I can tell. But, give them time. I'm sure there's more than 5 characters. Anyway, yeah, pretty disappointing. Considering we didn't really know what Firespight were working on. We were kind of hoping they were working on a decent single-player shooter thing, because, hey, it's PlayStation Studios. They make single-player games, right? Yeah, well, not anymore. Anyway, if you're interested, there's a beta for that later this year, and the game itself is scheduled for August of some point later on. God of War Ragnarok is getting a PC release September 19th, and it will include the Valhalla DLC, so it'll have everything on it that has currently been released for the game. Not going to bother playing the trailer because it's just God of War. Until Dawn, the remaster, remake, whatever way you want to look at it, looks more of a remaster, really. Anyway, also got a trailer. It's literally, I think, the first trailer for Until Dawn, just done in the new style, which isn't really a new style, it's just been up-resed. If you played Until Dawn before, you probably know what you're getting. If you haven't, it's pretty good. Choose your own adventure narrative game from Supermassive, who make the Dark Pictures games and what have you. It's their best one so far, and it's not even close, really. Anyway, Guy Dance's Behemoth. This is a PSVR 2 game. It's launching in the fall, autumn. Where do you like this, Sony? Where do you like this? 1900. Yes. 124 years old. And he gave me the age thing anyway, for fuck's sake. Yes, come on, for fuck's sake. You have me logged in. You know how old I am, Google. You follow me around the internet. You definitely know who I am, right? Anyway, Behemoth is first-person Shadow of the Colossus, basically. Um, so keeping in mind this is PSVR 2 and they've stylized it to look like a proper trailer, but who knows if the actual gameplay will be like this. Uh, and also, you never really get an appreciation for depth from 2D trailers for VR games, so it could play very differently or feel very different when you're actually playing it. But either way, you would still need to have the headset itself. So there is the kind of fairly normalized at this point first-person melee stuff that you've seen in a lot of VR titles by now. The kind of thing that sets Behemoth apart is the Behemoth bit, where you have to actually climb the creatures and fight them, and they chose not to actually show any of that in the trailer. So that was a good move. Good move on their part. There's really no bit where it shows you actually, assaulting the large creatures. Definitely not colossi, they're behemoths. Anyway, I don't know why they didn't bother showing that bit, but they didn't, and here we are. Out in autumn at some point. Path of Exile 2 is free to play Diablo, effectively. So Path of Exile 2 will be coming to PlayStation 5, and you'll be able to join its early access later on this year. Monster Hunter Wilds showed off a pretty significant trailer. This will be the next Monster Hunter. It won't be out till next year at some point either. And it's kind of following along from Monster Hunter World rather than Monster Hunter Rise. Monster Hunter Rise would have been the most recent Monster Hunter, but Monster Hunter World is the last one that was on the PlayStation console. Anyway, they're continuing to use the Resident Evil engine, as you can see. Gameplay-wise, it's Monster Hunter. You can't say it's not Monster Hunter. It's definitely Monster Hunter. Some new monsters. This guy is new. I forget his name. He's a kind of bear dog thing. He looks horrible. Your character is also fully voice acted this time around, which they typically aren't. Usual Japanese protagonist type thing. No, they usually don't voice the main character, but this time they are. Probably the biggest standout is, yes, new monsters, and also there's one or two new weapons, but you can also take 2 weapons with you now into the field. Usually you are restricted to just whatever weapon you took with you when you went on the hunt, and you're kind of locked to that, and if you brought the wrong weapon, that's your fault. Now you have 2, so if you brought the wrong weapon twice, now it's your fault. Anyway, that will be interesting, because I've always kind of felt like, I kind of wish I had a ranged weapon with me right now. I didn't realize this creature could fly, or I didn't realize they'd be flying so much, and so on. And I'm like, okay, I'll have to deal with just having a longsword at this point. Having the mount actually in combat with you, also kind of new. You could mount creatures in Monster Hunter World, and you could mount them in Monster Hunter Rise, but they were usually just a means of transport and would run away once you were in combat, or throw you off once you were in combat. They actually hang around in combat now. That does make things a little bit more interesting. Anyway, we'll know more about this probably Summer Games Fest. Capcom have said they have more to say in June, which is pretty much code for Summer Game Fest. Yeah, we'll learn more about Monster Hunter Wilds then. Expand again. Silent Hill 2. I'm gonna swap to this trailer instead for Silent Hill 2. So Konami had their own Silent Hill transmission thing after the State of Play, where it might as well have just been called the Silent Hill 2 transmission, because they didn't talk about any of the other Silent Hill things that they had going on. Anyway, it was all just about the Silent Hill 2 remake, showing off what they've done, that they've changed it from a fixed camera angle thing to an over-the-shoulder thing, like the Resident Evil 2 remake, and in a lot of ways it just looks like Resident Evil now, which is a good and a bad thing. But Silent Hill was kind of notable in that it wasn't Resident Evil. It was very much not Resident Evil. That was its whole thing. It was more of a psychological horror thing, whereas Resident Evil is more of an action, body horror kind of thing. Anyway, I'm going to skip ahead to the gameplay. So they do a chunk of gameplay here where they have you on the street for a little bit, and then they head into the hospital or the school. I think they head to the hospital first. And they show off a little bit of it. Lots of James just walking around being sad. Which is, I mean, to be fair, that is Silent Hill 2. He does spend a lot of time walking around being sad. Um, but yeah, it does just feel like it's Resident Evil. You know? It's Silent Hill Biohazard in a lot of ways, which is kind of disappointing. Anyway, horrible enemies. There is combat, melee combat, and so on. There is ranged combats over the shoulder. It's very Resident Evil. What's kind of, I know it's disappointing necessarily, but I know they have to make concessions for modern sensibilities and what have you, but combat in Silent Hill was always bad. And it was meant to reflect that your character is not trained. And also, they just weren't arsed making a proper combat system. But mostly, story-wise, you know, James is not a military guy. Harry from the first game, also not a military guy. Heather from the third game is a teen girl, definitely not, you know, militarily trained. And Silent Hill 4, I don't even know who the protagonist is, what their deal is, but I know their background is not, you know, actual combat training or what have you, whereas the stars from Resident Evil are very much, you know, trained to be able to fight. You know, it makes sense that they have that kind of level of combat ability and so on. It does not make sense that James can headshot somebody from 50 feet away, you know? Anyway, we'll move on until I hit the interior. Who was the hospital? Okay. Hospital area, I mean, it does look good. That's the thing. I can't really discount that it doesn't look like a good game. And the story beats, at least what they've shown in the trailer, it does look like they're hitting them properly. Performance capture is well done. You know, you can tell, you can show emotion on the characters' faces. Something that's kind of difficult to do on the OG PlayStation, PlayStation 2. Got the nurses, you got their faces scratched out, which is why they look like bubblehead nurses when James sees them. Kind of chasing after this young girl into the hospital. It's kind of what the story point is here. You're like, she shouldn't be out here. There's horrible monsters everywhere. But why isn't she seeing the horrible monsters? Maybe it's because it's a psychological thing, James, and you're only seeing the monsters because you're a monster. Anyway, combat with the nurse. I think this is like a direct kind of retort to the people who are complaining about the nurse just vaulting over, you know, waist-high wall, and it looked terrible. They kind of changed it up here, and she does kind of swing the pipe kind of weirdly and monsterly, and I think I skipped past a bit where I'll just show the whole thing because it's actually a really well done animation where she gets back up, and it is super creepy looking. And I think it's taken from one of the performers in the upcoming film. I think they might have gotten one of them to do performance for the nurses. A later nurse. Although it's interestingly that the nurse actually caught. Yeah, it must be a later encounter that they actually catch your melee weapon and prevent you from attacking with it. Anyway, there's a bit where they get up, and I'm pretty sure they got a contortionist to do the performance for it because it looks super creepy. But yeah, it's like a direct retort to the people who are going, look at this stupid thing just vaulting over a wall like they're playing Fortnite or something. And it did look dumb at the time, to be fair. There, here it is. Gross. Anyway, and yeah, they did the kind of, what's it called, Jacob's Ladder thing, where the people kind of move weird, which was definitely a direct inspiration for Silent Hill, despite what all of the creatives on Silent Hill said. Like, what's Jacob's Ladder? We've never seen it. That's just going to do a complete copy of it. But anyway, go watch Jacob's Ladder. It's good. Anyway, moving on. Silent Hill 2, I don't think it has a release date yet. But we're still waiting on that. Alien Rogue Incursion. Am I even going to bother playing this trailer? It was so short. Showed nothing. Yeah, come on. It's incredibly short. Rogue Incursion is going to be a VR game, PSVR 2. It's not clear if it's an action-focused thing or if it's going to be more along the lines of Alien Isolation. I'm kind of hoping for the latter, but I'm expecting the former. Mostly because you have a gun. It's kind of the easiest way to go with that. See? So you are probably a Marine of some kind, and if you have a gun, you're probably going to have to use it, but I'm pretty sure you have a gun in Alien Isolation, and it does fuck all to the alien, so... Anyway, that's it. That's the trailer. We don't know. We just still know very little about the game. The fact that it's just you and it's only showing one alien would suggest that maybe they're going for the alien isolation thing. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for, but we'll see. Marvel Rivals. Oh, sorry. Alien Rogue Incursion is out later this year. Probably around October, November. Marvel Rivals getting its beta test on PlayStation 5 in July, so you'll have that and Concord, and you won't be able to tell which one is Guardians of the Galaxy. Dynasty Warriors Origins coming out next year at some point. If you're familiar with the Dynasty Warriors thing, it's the 1v1000 combat thing where you're just mowing down just hundreds of guys all at once. It's fun, but it does get repetitive after a while. And the Dynasty Warriors games haven't been great most recently. A lot of their licensed stuff has been a lot better, whereas their core Dynasty Warriors line has not been amazing. So we'll see. They've taken some time off for a while. It's been a good while since Dynasty Warriors 9 came out, so they've taken a while to get Dynasty Warriors Origins going. If you're not familiar, the story is the same every time because they keep retelling the Romance of the Three Kingdoms tale of how the Chinese Empire was founded. Despite it being called the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, there was nothing romantic about it. It was a very brutal war. Dynasty Warriors Origins seems to be more of a almost like an Assassin's Creed kind of thing. They're just like inserting this one guy into the war, and that's the character you play. Whereas the previous Dynasty Warriors games, you would just play a hero from the saga. Anyway, Ballad of Antara is going to be a free-to-play Dark Souls, by the looks of things, which is an interesting way to go about it, but okay. So I think this is from a Korean developer, and I think that the free-to-play nature of it means that they're going to basically have characters, so you won't necessarily have a build so much. You'll basically have a character you play, and that character has their own skills, movesets, and so on, weaponry, and what have you. And the free-to-play bit will be, you'll probably have to do the thing that Genshin does, whereas, you buy like 10 lottery tickets and see what you get when you in the roulette wheel. That was a weird metaphor. Anyway, it's going for the open world thing. The combat, you can see that's just the Shadows of Yharnam there. Anyway, or not the Shadows of Yharnam. What are they called in the third one? The Abyss Watchers. Dark Souls. Anyway, it is that kind of combat, as you can see. Different characters. How many of these are bosses? How many of these are actually player characters? We won't know. But I think it's having a beta test later this year, or the game itself is actually coming out later this year. This could almost have been Sekiro, and I feel like that guy, the adult, is almost dressed like Sekiro? Almost? Kinda? Anyway, Ballad of Antara, not a great name. It doesn't really tell you what kind of game it is, although does Dark Souls tell you what kind of game it is? Probably not. Does it have a date? Next year. Okay. Infinity Nikki. So, the Nikki series, not really one that's ever made its way out of Asia. It is a fashion dress-up thing that's somewhat of a pseudo RPG in ways, and Infinity Nikki is basically an open world version of it. Play dress up, the dresses give you different powers and what have you. Yeah, it's not really like a combat thing. More of a platformy type thing. But they're making it an open world situation. It's fun, it's cute, but again, it never really translated outside of Japan for the most part. I think maybe it was on DS. Never owned one, not sure. Anyway, it'll be fun and cute, what have you, and hopefully not $69.99. Anyway, that will be out. There's no delay. There's no day for the release of the full game, but there's a beta test later in the year. And then Where Winds Meet as well. So we're gonna look at another game later on in the update section that looks almost identical to it. And there's another game that also looks identical to it. We're getting to the point where it's like, which game am I actually looking at now? Anyway, Where Winds Meet is a Wuxia thing, or Wire Fu if you prefer, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type deal. I think it was the first of the kind of Chinese-inspired Soulsy type things that I saw. I don't remember now. that wasn't Wolong. Wolong was actually the first one I saw. Anyway, we'll skip ahead to combat. But yeah, it's Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, what have you. Neo. Maybe Neo's a bit closer now. But it's gonna focus a little bit more on waifu kind of things. But I'm not seeing a whole lot of. Why do they keep saying this is a waifu game when you're seeing very little of it? Anyway, lots of boss fights there. You're only seeing it in the trailers or in the CG stuff. Hit me with your umbrella, please. It hurt. Guy with a fucking umbrella beat me. Anyway, that's Roman's Maze. No release date or anything for that, but probably next year. Anyway, that was State of Play. It was pretty disappointing overall. Nothing from, just a hint of what the other PlayStation studios are working on. What's Naughty Dog working on? What are Sucker Punch working on? What's Insomniac? Well, we know Insomniac is working on Wolverine, I suppose, even though it's not been confirmed, but the leaks suggest that's what's going on. Anyway, 2024, you can kind of see it here. Astrobot, Concord, God of War PC, Until Dawn remake, Silent Hill 2 remake. Yeah, it's a pretty lean year. Like, only two of those games are PlayStation first-party games. I forgot Concord is Firesprite. Firesprite is owned by Sony. So 2 first-party games. To be fair, I was assuming 0 this year. So, I was wrong about that. Anyway, moving on. So the reception of the State of Play was not great, as you can see. Astrobot trailer, 99% likes. Yeah, everybody really likes the Astrobot trailer. Not many people like the Concord one, though. It's sitting on an 18% likes. Not ideal. And the main reason given away was kind of the bait and switch of it. Many of the comments under the gameplay trailer are complaining that it's a 5v5 shooter that is too similar to Overwatch or Valorant, and the footage didn't appear to suggest there was anything particularly new about Concord. And others noted that the cinematic trailer gave the impression that Concord was going to be a single-player thing like Guardians of the Galaxy, and then turned out it was a team-based shooter. I mean, you could feel the energy on Twitter just turn when the CG trailer turned into here's what the game is. It's a 5v5 multiplayer. I think. Okay. Not great. All right, updates outside of that. Burning Sword Death Sun is the other game I was thinking of that is also a waifu Asia set Demon Souls, Dark Souls thing. Combat. Yes, it's another one of these, and there's another one as well that I don't remember the name of. It's Whispering Winds. Is that what it is? There's Where Winds Meet. There's this now, which is new. I hadn't heard about this one before. There's Black Myth Wukong, and then there's another one that has like a female protagonist, and I don't remember what it's called, but they all look the fucking same. I don't know which one is which. Anyway, that's currently only confirmed for PC. Conscript, not Concord. Conscript is a coming survival horror game that's set in World War One in the trenches. It's not clear if this is like a psychosis thing or somebody's had a psychotic break and now they're just seeing the war as this kind of monstrous thing, even though it is a monstrous thing, but they're seeing it as even more, like a survival horror situation. I guess it still was a survival horror situation. Anyway, the point is, it's a survival horror game set in the trenches during World War One. I don't know where exactly. I'm not sure if it's set in France or in Germany or in wherever. Or what if you are, trying to escape, or if you're trying to go AWOL, or what the deal is, or if it's literally I'm just trying to survive this war. Who knows? I mean, if you have enemies already in the trenches with you, this is bad. You're in very bad territory. I think there's going to be a demo for this during the next Steam Next Fest, which is out pretty soon. Yeah, so there'll be a demo on 10th of June. 10th of June is in and around when Steam Next Fest starts, so yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then we have a couple of updates. Zenless Zone Zero, which is the next thing from the Hoyoverse people, the Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail people. So that will be launching July 4th. Normally, these games launch on PC first, then sometimes mobile as well, and then down the line they hit console and PlayStation. But this is the first time that all platforms, so PS5, PC, iOS, and Android, will all be launching at the exact same time, which will be the 4th of July, and then there's various pre-order, or if you play the game in and around launch and what have you. These games are usually free to play, so the tenor would be just that's how much you're going to spend. But because it's free to play, you know there's going to be microtransactions and what have you. And if you play Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, you know what those entail. They're like a roulette spin. You pay, you buy tickets basically for the lottery. You may or may not win something. Well, you'll always win something. It's just a case of are you going to win anything good? Little Nightmares 3 has been delayed into 2025 for the usual reasons that are given. Quality, we want to spend more time polishing it, etc., etc. This is a fairly significant delay, so it would suggest there's a little bit more to it than just polish. But obviously they're not going to say that. We'll be sharing more about Little Nightmares 3 this summer, which, again, code for Summer Game Fest, so we'll probably learn more about that next week, or the week after, whenever Summer Game Fest is. I think it's next week. PlayStation VR 2 has an unannounced PC adapter, so normally I don't bring up unannounced or rumored or reported stuff, usually, but practically every outlet was talking about it, so we would suggest that there's maybe there's something to this. So Sony has certified a PlayStation VR 2 PC adapter in South Korea. It has gotten approval for its use. It was approved at the end of March of last year. Been in the works for a while, and we do know that Sony has been talking about testing the PSVR 2 for PC compatibility, and it does kind of work on PC. But there's a lot of workarounds required. There's a lot of software you need to run to kind of take down some of the DRM copy protection that's going on in the PSVR 2, and some of its signal is proprietary and a lot of other stuff. So having an adapter that would just strip all of that out and it would just be used as a fairly standard VR headset would be good. If that does take away, though, some of the good things that the PSVR 2 does have, foveated rendering, eye tracking, all that kind of stuff, that's not as good. So yeah, we'll have to see exactly how well it works. It might be the case that they just have a patent for it, or the adapter just in general. Just we have an adapter that will take the signal and make it work. Then later on down the line, they'll work on one that will be able to keep all of those features. We'll see. Again, it's unannounced. Sony haven't mentioned anything about it. They're not ready to talk about it yet. Anyway, free Epic game this week is Chivalry 2. Chivalry is a first-person medieval combat melee thing. You're just one guy in this big melee throng. Try not to die. Basically, a lot of it boils down to just try not to die. You're not even trying to kill anybody, just try not to die. Because it is entirely multiplayer, as far as I'm aware. I don't think there is a single-player component to the game. What guys get away with just being on the battering ram? Who are those guys? Why can't I be him? I don't want to be the guy who was fucking trying to not die in the middle of the melee. Anyway, moving on. Monthly games this week. So Sony's kicking off their Days of Play celebration thing, but that means they buried the PlayStation Plus thing in there somewhere. So here's the PlayStation Plus. Monthly games for June. So we have SpongeBob SquarePants: The Cosmic Shake. I don't know if that's I think that's the newest one, and not the remake. The remake of Battle of Bikini Bottom, I think, was the remake, and then Cosmic Shake is the newest one. But it's like an old school 3D platformer kind of game. What I've heard, it's decent, and if you like SpongeBob, you'll probably get a little bit more out of it. Streets of Rage 4 was a return to the Streets of Rage series. It is very good, and the music to it is incredible. Very good game. Highly recommended. Chances are you already own it, though. And then AEW Fight Forever is a wrestling thing that is not WWE. It's a different outlet, different platform, something. Buried also later will be some updates coming to the PlayStation catalog. So there's a couple of VR2 games that are going to be added to the catalog. There are no PSVR2 games on the catalog right now. But they will be there if you are a premium member, which is the highest tier. So Ghostbusters, there's a mini golf game, Synth Riders, which is a bit of a Bit of a Guitar Hero VR thing, I think. Before Your Eyes is a pretty depressing narrative game, and in VR, I imagine it's even worse, even more depressing. And then The Walking Dead: Saint and Sinners are generally considered one of the better games on VR platforms right now. And then something's also coming to classics. Again, you'll need premium for this, but Tomb Raider Legend, which was a return to Tomb Raider, or return to form for Tomb Raider after Angel of Darkness, which almost killed the whole franchise. They came back, they went back to basics. It's good. It's a good game. Sly Cooper, also amazing platformer game, and Star Wars Clone Wars, I know nothing about. I don't know. Then additional catalog editions. Additional editions. We'll talk more about this when they're actually available. Dredge has been added, Marvel Super Heroes 2 has been added, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the definitive edition, which is not definitive in any way whatsoever, but there we go. But we'll talk more about that later when the catalog has its actual refresh later in the month. Anyway, those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? You can play Venture to the Vile, which is a Metroidvania, melee Metroidvania type thing, where you play a character who is wearing a deer face, deer head for some reason, deer head mask, not entirely sure why. And I believe defeating enemies allows you to take on some of their characteristics. So you get like wings if you're defeating a bat, and with stronger ramming attack for defeating creatures that can ram you, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it looks interesting, and again, if it's interesting and it's a Metroidvania, I pretty much have to play it. Contractual obligation, so that will probably be on the channel at some point later on. Multiversus has come back from the dead a year later when it was siloed because, I don't know, the actual reason given wasn't particularly great, but it's back now and performs even worse than it did before that. Almost like it should probably go back into beta. Anyway, is there any actual gameplay in this trailer? Just, hey, it's that product, and hey, it's that product now. Yeah, I think this is just various products being mashed against each other. Anyway, Multiversus is Super Smash Bros. With Warner Brothers. And from what I've seen, at least from the competitive scene, they're pretty pissed off about it because, one, it's very expensive now. If you want to get every character available for tournaments and stuff like that, it's very costly. Like Smash Bros, which was not particularly expensive. And then also it's just broken. There's very easy infinite combos you can get. You can lock people into corners very easily and that kind of thing. So yeah, it definitely needed more time in development and not more time making more things for people to buy, which seems to be what is actually what happened. Anyway, so these next two games aren't necessarily new, but they are making a jump to a different platform than they were on before. So Phantom Fury, up until now, was locked to PC. On PC for about a month and is now available on consoles. So pretty sure it's PlayStation 5 for definite, and I think it's also going to be on Xbox Series. This is a sequel to Ion Fury, which is kind of female Duke Nukem, basically. I forget the character's name, but that's kind of how it's presented. It's Duke Nukem, but it's a woman, so it's okay. That's kind of shitty to say. Anyway, the second one, Phantom Fury, plays a little bit more like... I mean, it still very much plays like a 3D, first-person shooter. But there's a lot of just interactions in the environment, like the Duke Nukem games. There's a lot of things you can just do that serve no basis for the gameplay or the story, but you can just do it anyway. The usual things, you can interact with sinks and what have you, but you can also interact with like arcade machines, ATM machines and what have you. Lots of things that you wouldn't normally need to interact with, but you can for no reason. And I think that was kind of one of the detractions from the original reviews, which was it spent a little bit too much time on those kind of superfluous things and not enough time on the actual game. But I don't know, seems fine. Seems alright to me, and the original game was also an okay. Anyway, Humanity, up until now, was locked to it was locked to PS4 and PS5, and now is available on Xbox and PC. I think it might have already been on PC, I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't know if this trailer... Oh, it does have gameplay. Okay, so Humanity is Lemmings. So the old Lemmings games, you need to get a constant flow of humanity from point A to point B, and there are all sorts of shenanigans trying to kill them and make you not get them from point A to point B. But that's your job. It's your job as this mysterious Shiba Inu to ferry humanity from one point to the next. Anyway, moving on. Unfortunately, though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games. Video game industry. So, Take-Two still wants to bring its biggest IPs to mobile. So this is 2 years since Take-Two bought Zynga. Zynga being a major mobile platform, mobile developer at the time. Their profile has kind of gone down a little bit in recent years, so they are the Farmville people. You may or may not remember those games. Farmville, Words with Friends, and various other Villes and various other with Friends games. That's the Zynga people. So at the time, it was meant to be, we're gonna take over Zynga and we're gonna leverage them to get BioShock and GTA and Borderlands and that kind of stuff into like mobile games and make even more money. And the way it was pointed out is the creation of new titles based on Take-Two's core intellectual properties. All of these properties have so far been entirely unexploited for the mobile and free-to-play world. That's the way the CEO termed it. Unexploited, not unused or underutilized or these unexploited. He actually said that, an actual direct quote. Anyway, so 2 years later, we haven't seen anything. There hasn't been a Borderlands mobile. There hasn't been a GTA mobile, and so on and so forth. And his quote was, arguably, it's not the best strategy to bring your already pre-existing IPs to mobile, and it's better to go after, put it, not naturally occurring, but IPs that are just from mobile first, or something like that. Arguably, it's not the best one, because even mobile titles based on traditional core established IP can fail, and the biggest titles in mobiles are, of course, native. Yes, that's why Pokemon Go is doing really bad right now. Monster Hunter World Go is also doing really bad. Yep. They're not like some of the highest selling ones or anything. Anyway, after saying all that, it was then essential a joint venture between Zynga and Take-Two like day one, and now it's a very significant business. But yeah, we want to do just native IP, stuff that was just from mobile, and that's where it was born, and that's where we're going to go from it. Right now, Match Factory, Zynga's current money-making thing, it's another 3D Match 3 thing. But yeah, let's just go with, brand new IPs for mobile only. But yeah, we're also going to bring Star Wars and Game of Thrones later on this year. Because, pre-existing IP fails on mobile. That's why we're bringing two really big ones. It's almost like they just don't really know what they're doing. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of Take-Two CEO not really know what they're doing, asked about GTA 6 on PC, says like a whole bunch of nothing. The lack of an announcement is not something that could be set in stone as near as I could tell, because the only thing that happens after the lack of an announcement is an announcement, I suppose. Or a continuing lack of an announcement. I guess that could happen too. Doesn't seem to me that either would be set in stone. Rockstar has an approach to platforms we've seen before. They will make more announcements in due time. Believe that the right strategy for our business is to be where the consumer is. And historically, what this company has done is address consumers anywhere they are on any platform that makes sense. Okay? No? Not okay? Are you alright? Do you smell toast? That was a whole bunch of nonsense for him to just say Rockstar will announce their PC port when they're ready. That's it. That's all you have to say. Just say we're leaving that up to Rockstar, as we have always done. And they've always brought GTA to PC eventually. And always not brought Red Dead Redemption to PC for some reason. Just what a bunch of fucking nonsense. And it's entirely because video game industry in general is incredibly secretive. Even more secretive than like the film industry. At least in film industry you get like set visits and shit like that. You don't even get that in video games. It's just complete silence, and we will control the story as much as possible. More than as much as possible. We'll go after your job if you leak things. Stuff like that. And this is why he has to tie himself in knots trying to say that, yeah, we all know there's going to be a PC port, but I'm not allowed to say there's going to be a PC port because the shareholders will give me shit. It's so dumb. Anyway, we're not done with Take-Two. GTA publisher Take-Two reportedly looking to get rid of indie label Private Division. So again, I don't normally go in for things that are reportedly, it's rumored that and so on. But again, this one seems pretty obvious. So Private Division were responsible for the Ollie and Roll7 developer, and they were also responsible for the Kerbal Space Program developer. Intercept, and what's the name of the Roll7 for Roller Drum. And we know earlier this year they were scheduled to be laid off. That is actually happening as well with the Kerbal Space Program people, the Intercept games. They have now announced that there have been a ton of layoffs at that studio, to the point that the studio can't really continue. But the CEO is still claiming that they're not shuttering the studio, but they definitely are. There's nobody working there anymore. So, is it technically even still open if nobody actually works there? If a tree falls in the forest, is there any labor dispute? I don't know. Take-Two is trying to get rid of its indie label, Private Division. The company's recent studio closures and mismanagement have been quietly killing the indie publisher. This is from some sources that spoke to IGN directly. The majority of Private Division staff were laid off at the end of April, and there's only been like a kind of small string of people that have been keeping the publisher going, and it's mostly just in service to No Rest for the Wicked right now. Just Moon Studios people. Practically nothing else they're working on. So after a string of reported closures of studios, that'd be Intercept, Roll7, and a couple of others, but the Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick is still claiming that the company did not shutter those studios, even though it absolutely did. But okay, the whole slayoff situation. That's a bit better. The whole slayoff situation proved what we already felt. One source said, Take-Two could not care less about its employees. Yeah, number not go up, even though number very much did go up with both of those games, but number not going up anytime soon because you just put out Roller Drum. And Kerbal Space Program is still in early access, so they're not going to be seeing a number go up anytime soon from either of those. Bye. Right. Anyway. Private Division staff, around the end of April, when all of those layoffs happened, were reportedly told that Take-Two would no longer be supporting the indie label, and that Take-Two was reportedly looking to sell the indie label and the studio. There is interest from a private equity firm. Oh, that's not good. That's not good at all. These conversations are reportedly being facilitated by people connected to Moon Studios and not Private Division people themselves. Remember, Private Division are basically only looking after Moon Studio right now. So it looks like Moon Studios are kind of looking to divest themselves from Private Division or get somebody to buy Private Division so that they would have somewhat more ownership over it. Moon Studios themselves were the subject of a 2022 report alleging an oppressive workplace, so yeah, it seems like that's what they're going for. Sources talking to IGN at the time said everything in that report was true and worse. So yeah, things aren't looking great for Take-Two. They spent about $20 billion to get Zynga and haven't done anything with it for 2 years. And then they've shuttered a bunch of their more interesting developers. They're pretty much tied and almost beholden entirely now to Rockstar and the 2K games, the sports games, NBA stuff. They have very little else going for them right now. Whatever Zynga's putting out, Take-Two are losing a lot of money, basically. And most of that is because $20 billion on Zynga did not recover its costs, because of course it didn't. $1 billion is so much money, and you spent 20 of them. You absolute insane people. Anyway, we'll move away from Take-Two for now. I'm sure we'll be back to them soon enough. Sony removes controversial Neil Druckmann interview after finding significant errors and inaccuracies from your own interview that you conducted with your own people entirely internally. How did you not notice these before? Anyway, we talked about this interview last week. Sony conducted an internal interview with some of its creatives, one of them being Neil Druckmann. This was for an upcoming, not an earnings report exactly, it was more like a business state report or something for shareholders and what have you. And they were talking about what's going to be coming down the line for PlayStation stuff, and a lot of quotes were misquoted or misattributed, or entire things were just inserted that Druckmann never said. Several significant errors and inaccuracies. At the time, he was quoted or paraphrased to have said that his next game would redefine mainstream perceptions of gaming and that AI is really going to revolutionize how content is being created. Druckmann later on came back to say that words, context, and intent were unfortunately lost, which is a very charitable way to say, hey, you completely misquoted me, but you also pay me, so I don't want to be too mean about what I say. So he fought back on the redefined mainstream perceptions of gaming kind of thing, and basically what he wanted to say was, we're putting a lot of effort into this, and we're changing a lot of things, and we're really looking forward to see what the perception is of the game when it comes out, and we're hoping it's good. Which is pretty typical for somebody working on a creative work. He did not, however, push back on the AI bit, so maybe that part's true. Or maybe Sony really, really don't want him to push back on that. Who knows? Anyway, Sony's statement in re-reviewing, so they are admitting it was reviewed in the first place. Our recent interview with Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann, we have found several significant errors and inaccuracies that don't represent his perspective and values, including topics such as animation, writing, and future projects. That's a lot of topics, guys. That's like almost all of the ones we were talking about. Might in fact be all of them. Anyway, we apologize to Neil for misrepresenting his words and for any negative impact this interview may have caused him and his team. Was considerable because there was quite the backlash about those quotes. In coordination with Naughty Dog and SIE, we have removed the interview. This was an interview you guys conducted all by yourselves with Neil Druckmann in-house, complete access to him that most outlets, in fact, no other outlet would have. Kotaku doesn't have this kind of access. IGN doesn't have this kind of access. The entirety of Gamer Network does not have this kind of access. Sony very famously keeps their creatives behind the PR wall. You want to talk to somebody, you talk to a PR rep, you don't talk directly to them. So having these kind of interviews and seeing how badly they are handled and how badly they are put out and edited and reviewed and just finessed to tell a particular story to the point that the interview doesn't even look like an interview anymore, it's just a press release. And then knowing that IGN have just bought Gamer Network, so there's even further consolidation in video game journalism. It's bad. It paints a very, very bad picture for that side of the industry. The side that the consumer sees. We don't see the internal part as much, and we're relying on those journals, those outlets, to get this kind of information. And when that is locked up and this is what's churned out and this is allegedly an interview with, despite my feelings on Neil Druckmann, he is a central creative figure in PlayStation, to find that it is so massively edited that it's just not true in any way whatsoever. How much of it can you even believe? If they do an interview now with Herman Hulst, can you believe that? If they do an interview now with, I can't remember the name of the creative lead for Sucker Punch, but can you believe that? And so on. It's bad. It's very bad. Anyway, speaking of bad, Star Citizen still doesn't have a release date. It's fucking 15 years or something at this point, but has raised over $700 million so far, somehow. Why do people keep giving this game money? Anyway, Star Citizen has raised over $700 million in crowdfunding, even though it still lacks a full release date. Maybe this year, guys. Maybe this is the year it'll actually happen. Anyway, this has coincided with... so they recently got just a full $3 million from 25th of May all by itself. That was because they opened it up as a free play period for people to check it out again, and then if they wanted, they could pledge more. So $702,634,839. And it's not out. It's still in early access, and it has no release date. It's been in work now for over a decade. That's generous. It must be approaching like 2 decades at this point. And it's very well known for its whale status. The most recent DLC pack cost 46,000 British pounds, $50K, something like that. Anyway, it's also suffering layoffs and such. It's a highly toxic company, what have you. But it's just this much money just thrown in the bin. Like, I wonder why. I wonder why the industry is doing so poorly. This is just a scam. It's just at this point, it has to just be a scam. If the game ever comes out, it will never reach the 700 million deal. Like that's incredible. Anyway, Spyro and Crash Studios Toys for Bob partners with Xbox on its next game. This was heavily rumored for a good while after Toys for Bob split from Activision after the acquisition. After Microsoft bought Activision, Toys for Bob took the opportunity to buy themselves out because they didn't want to be in the Call of Duty salt mines forever, because that's pretty much what they've been doing since the last Crash Bandicoot game and since Crash Team Rumble went nowhere, even though almost certainly they were forced to make that game. Anyway, we're excited to announce that we'll be partnering with Xbox to publish our next new game. No information on what the game is, and it's still quite a ways off, so they have nothing to tell about it. Anyway, we're still very early in development, so don't expect any news around that anytime soon. Its most recent game was Crash Team Rumble, which I think it made about 6 months before it was canned. Another live service thing that nobody asked for. All everybody really wanted was Crash Bandicoot 5. Anyway, moving on. Some stuff in the community. So normally when we do community things, they're just silly mods and shit that people make. But every now and then we want to talk about how studios talk to the community. So this is coming from Valorant Studio Riot Games. No one should have to grow a thicker skin. Valorant Studio commit to harsh penalties for harassment. If you want to make evil statements, you are not welcome here. So this is the latest update to how they're going to be handling moderation. They're finalizing updates to existing policies to focus on stronger, faster penalties. New penalties for severe harmful players, including hardware bans, which goes beyond the IP ban, which is the usual one. The hardware ban would actually ban the PC you actually play on. Specific machine itself. No IP, misdirection, VPNs, any of that won't get around that problem. That's pretty heavy-handed, but played a multiplayer game at this point, you can think it's kind of needed, really. Increasing support for manual reviews so they can do these faster, expanding the rollout of Riot voice evaluation. This is more just for flagging situations, but to additional regions. Up until this point, I think it was mostly just English speaking. One-time review of the top suspected offenders from the previous act and issue penalties. So when they float people up to the top that, like, these people need to be reviewed, and they won't have to go through multiple reviews anymore. It'll just be one and you're gone. So good. These are all they sound pretty heavy-handed, but it's because it's kind of needed. But a lot of this has come from a recent tweet from Taylor Morgan, who's I don't know them myself, but apparently they're well known in the Valorant community. I know you hear us, I know you see us. If this goes unpunished, I am taking this as an active act from you that you do not give a single fuck about any of the women and minorities that play your game, and I will rally to boycott. So this came about from a video post of one of their recent sessions, and they were subjected to all sorts of just horrible shit. And they're a well-known figure in the community. You can imagine how poorly people who aren't well-known are treated. So this was kind of seen as Riot Games responding to it, but this would also suggest that a lot of this stuff was already in the works. So it might just be a coincidence, or it might be the impetus for them to talk about it now instead of later. We don't know. Anyway, we do believe that a person should not have to be in a position to grow a thicker skin, or whatever other unhelpful suggestions have been thrown out there just to avoid threats of violence or literal hate speech. Good for them. Riot, though, for their part, were the subject of a report recently about toxic workplace, sexual assaults, sexual harassment, and so on. So since then, they have actually, Riot themselves were subject of allegations and lawsuits related to an abusive workplace culture a few years ago, and have been careful to position themselves as having learned from the experience. So, question of whether or not they actually have learned from the experience, or if they're just making it look like they have. If it results in the same result, then that's fine. Whether they learn from it or not, at least if they're putting in safeguards and stuff. Anyway, going back to the usual thing for community things, which is the silly mods. The legally distinct but definitely not Bloodborne cart is out now and looks really good. So Bloodborne cart, which is no longer called Bloodborne cart, it's now called Nightmare cart, is now available. If you want to play it, it's on itch.io, and will make its way to Steam at some point. But yes, it's very dumb and very silly. And I haven't played it yet, but I have it ready to go. I'm going to play it a little bit later on. But yeah, this started off as an April Fool's joke. as the guy who made the Bloodborne demake, which took Bloodborne, effectively made the first area up until Gascoigne in PlayStation 1 graphics, and it was really, really good, really fun. And then they put out an April Fool's thing to do like a Mario Kart but Bloodborne, and people thought it was really funny, and it got a lot of responses, and they went, hey, well, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to make the actual game instead. And they did for a really long time, and it was going to be Bloodborne Kart, and it was going to be out later on this year, and then Sony went, hey, actually don't do that, thanks. Thanks, Sony, for letting them get that far into development before you actually said anything, but okay. So they had to halt plans on that for a while and come back, and now it's now Nightmare Kart. And it only kind of looks like Bloodborne. And I don't think anybody owns the Nightmare Creatures IP anymore. I think that's an orphaned work. So they're fine. They don't have to worry about that. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna leave Silent Hill. Like, it's fairly late. Anyway, how's your news for the 27th to the 2nd of June 2024? State of play, largely disappointing, but I mean, I was kind of expecting that. So I was expecting to be disappointed, and I was. So maybe I wasn't disappointed? I don't know. Way to put that. Astrobot looks fun. My issue with Astrobot is Astrobot's Playroom, right, the one that came with the PS5, was also coming from Sony riding a bit of a high. There was a lot of goodwill from the player base. You know, people were kind of happy with how Sony had handled the PS4. It was doing pretty well, as you can tell now, because half of Sony's player base is still on the PS4. There was a lot of hype for it, for the PS5, because it was doing some interesting things. And it was seen as continuing this good streak that Sony were on. And there would have been a lot of goodwill to it, and going through the history of Sony and PlayStation and what have you. That was fine, and for me, right now, I'm kind of jaded and disillusioned with Sony, PlayStation in particular. I just think they've taken the wrong approach, and they're leading the industry as a whole in this weird approach where we're just going to focus on the stuff that we already know is successful and not try anything fun or interesting or new. So it's hard to get hyped for what is essentially a marketing gimmick. You know, Astrobot, as cute and fun as he is very much showing off Sony PlayStation products. You know, he's driving around on a DualSense, he's flying around on a PS5. His friends are PS4s and PSPs and what have you. Like, it's, for me at least, it is hard to have the same kind of glee that I had playing Playroom. I mean, that might change. When you're actually playing it, you might be able to just absorb yourself in it and go, you know, there's Bloodborne, man. Never mind that there hasn't been a sequel or a remaster or anything. I can just be happy and see Bloodborne, man. I don't know. See Parappa the Rapper and go, when was the last Parappa the Rapper game? PS2? That was a long time ago. Anyway, there's that. Everywhere else on the State of Play, Concord was obviously disappointing. It's another multiplayer PvP piece of shit. I mean, it'll probably be fine, but there are too many already, and the ones that are there are established. You know, you're going to have to do something pretty significant to take the player base away, and it's almost certainly going to have a smaller player base because it is console exclusive to PlayStation. It is going to be on PC as well, but it is console exclusive to PlayStation, so it's not going to be on Xbox, Switch, mobile, any of that kind of thing. They're already hamstringing themselves, and then Marvel Rivals is coming out, and it seems like it's going to have one, more recognizable characters. People will gravitate to that more likely, and also it's just doing the same game and will be on more platforms. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's a good position for them to be in. And again, no update on what any of the other studios are doing. So all in all, kind of a disappointing state of play. But it does kick off the definitely not E3 summer of video games. Summer Game Fest is next week. The Steam Next Fest is the week after. There's probably a Switch Direct, or I keep doing this. It's a Nintendo Direct, probably later on June, maybe around the same time as Summer Game Fest. And then there's a bunch of other like indie showcases that tend to happen around the same time. So there's still a lot to happen. There's still a lot to be talked about. Probably mostly in the independent space, because a lot of the bigger AAA publishers are kind of in a bit of a down year. You know, Xbox has spent a lot of money recently, so they're not really going to be putting out any big first party things anytime soon. Not that they really have anything. And Sony, again, similarly, are in a bit of a down slump. They've just put out Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, or whatever it was called. A lot of their bigger studios are doing that, and Naughty Dog are deep working on whatever. It's not The Last of Us 3, it's something else. And it's not Uncharted 5. So whatever they're working on, you know, they can't just bring assets across from The Last of Us, or well, maybe they can. I suppose it depends what they're working on. Sucker Punch Ghost of Tsushima 2 is what we're assuming, but we don't know. It's Ghost of something else. Ghost of Japan, maybe. They just open it out to the bigger map. And then there are Japanese studios that they don't have any anymore, so they don't have smaller games to plug this gap that we're seeing right now. It's down slump. Ordinarily, that's what your smaller studios are for. It's to plug these holes in your schedule, and you're filling them with free-to-play shit that nobody wants. Anyway, moving on. Industry bullshit. Take-Two are losing money a lot, and their CEO feels very inept, and it has been very obvious lately. I mean, I've always kind of felt that way, but it's been very obvious lately. Sony having to take down that interview that they did is obviously not a good look for them. You wonder how many of those are they going to do in the future? Are they going to continue locking their creators behind PR? You know, keeping them away from journalists in general? Probably they will. But again, it's just further stifling any news we're getting out of it. Any semblance of human beings working on video games. No, it always has to be churned through the PR processor before it's allowed to hit the public's ears. Anyway, yeah, that was very disappointing to see. It was very disappointing to see that, one, they just don't give interviews anymore, and then when they do, it's entirely internal. And now we find out that they are, you know, massaging the facts, taking paraphrasing a little too far. Kind of disappointing there. Anyway, new releases. Venture to the Vile. I haven't seen any reviews for it. It's probably flying under the radar a little bit. But yeah, we will probably play it at some point on the channel because it is a Metroidvania. As I said, they're not necessarily my favorite genre, but they're certainly close. You know, they're up there, definitely. Anytime I see anything kind of novel in the Metroidvania space, I need to play it. You know, we haven't seen Pyramid Head in any of the Silent Hill 2 reviews. We've only seen, like, deluxe edition statue shit. We haven't seen, you know, the actual in-game model, what they're like, and how much like Mr. X they're going to be, or if they're still going to stay as just a scripted thing. I guess we'll find out. Anyway, that was the news, but what's happening on the channel next week? So here is our Wall O games. Some games are still locked because they're not released yet. So Hollow Body is not out yet. Locomotive's not out yet. Bloodlines 2 is not out yet. Replaced. I need to move that because I think it has been pushed to 2025. Need to confirm that. Anyway, Green Ticks, the game has been played. If you want to check it out yourselves, youtube.com/DoomTrain5. And the yellow dots are the game is currently in process. So we are currently playing it, and Grey Clock is they're next on the list. So this week we play Duck Detective, The Secret Salami. It's a detective game along the same lines as Curse of the Golden Idol or Return of the Obra Dinn, so it's kind of a fill-in-the-blanks type thing. This time around you were called out to Bear Bus, which is a bus service, and somebody's lunch has been stolen, and you are there to figure out who stole the lunch, and you determine it's the Salami Bandit has stolen the lunch, and you need to figure out who amongst them is the Salami Bandit. It's very, as you can see, cute and, you know, very low stakes and what have you. It's very fun. Characterization is great. The voice work is really well done, and they lean into the it being a duck and various other animals and stuff like that. I think it's very good. It's extremely short. The 2 hour game, maybe three, if you decide to just really talk to everybody and exhaust everything you can do in it. But for the most part, it's a 2 hour game. Does a lot of good work, and I'm hoping they're going to use this as a kind of launch point to do more Duck Detective things with Bert McQuacklin. Anyway, hopefully they'll do more with it because it was very well done. Anyway, after that we moved on to Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and we are continuing with Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. So this is the schedule for next week. We probably won't triple do Lorelei because one, I don't think the game will actually last that long, and two, it's all very big brain time. Puzzles are quite involved. They do require a fair bit of your own legwork to figure out. Pen and paper is suggested advised for the game. We played a little bit of it last week on Wednesday of last week. And I really liked it, but I was kind of reserving the idea that this would just be a one shot because I didn't want to. I was curious if the puzzles were going to go, how much it was going to be like The Witness. And the Witness puzzles are not something I want to do on stream because they're quite difficult to figure out, and they're probably the type of puzzle that I struggle with the most, which is just spatial awareness type puzzles, spatial orientation and that kind of thing. I'm not great with. But Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is mostly mathematics, and I'm kind of good at mathematics puzzles, I think, or at least I like to think I am. So yeah, I'm fine with these. It's been a pretty interesting game so far. Story-wise, we've been invited to this mansion this former hotel, I think is what it is, and we've been invited there to help an artist perform their next piece of great work or great art. And we need to find script pages for them because I think they're a film director. And the script pages have been lost in the mansion, and we need to find them. I'm calling it a mansion because it's so very much reminds me of Resident Evil. There's no like shooting or survival element to it. There are some creatures that are chasing us, but they're fairly manageable to avoid, so far at least. The real villain and the real monster of the game is Mats. Some of it is just I don't know what's going on. I don't understand even where to begin with this puzzle. I have found a pretty good hint guide, so it doesn't give you the answers, but it will kind of point you in the right direction. So I have found that. We'll use that as a bit of a companion if I get super stuck during the streams. So Tuesday and Wednesday, yeah, probably will be Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Thursday, I have not decided yet. We might do a one shot because back-to-back triple big brain time might completely destroy me for that week. And then Final Fantasy V, Friday and Saturday. We didn't get around to playing it this week. Thursday, we were going to be doing an in-person D&D event on Friday, and I needed to prepare for that. So I took the Thursday afternoon, evening off to do that. And then the Friday, as I was making my way out there, my motorbike decided to stop working. So that was good. I spent the Friday evening waiting on Breakdown and Repair to come and get me, get the bike back, and kind of salvage as much of that evening as we could for Dungeons & Dragons. And then Saturday, to be honest, I was just so pissed off. I just didn't want the stream. My stream would have been just vitriol for the whole thing, and I didn't want that. So yeah, we didn't do any Final Fantasy V this week. So hopefully I'll be able to sort the bike out on Tuesday, because it's a bank holiday tomorrow here. So most of the mechanics won't be open. I might find one that is open, but I doubt it. I'd rather go to my usual guy. As far as I'm aware, he's not open on Mondays. Anyway, that's a long way to say that there was no Final Fantasy V last week. Anyway, there will be this week, and we can use recap on Sunday as usual. So yeah, Thursday, the Lorelei is mostly a placeholder. If I can't think of a game to play, we will just do Lorelei. But I'll decide at that point. Anyway, that's it from me for this week, for your news and for your channel update. I'll be back on Tuesday with Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, but for now, have a good rest of your Sunday, and hopefully I will see you then. Bye bye.